Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Aliens and Angels podcast. Since the beginning of 2025, I started off the new year with chapters 1 through 6 of my new book called Transdimensional Meet the New Neighbors. Please do go back and watch the replays to catch up on the readings. Today, we will continue to read and discuss Part 2, Chapter 7, Life on the Big Ship. And for those of you who have already purchased your copy, feel free to follow along and add your comments and ask me questions arising from the content. And if you do not own your own copy, the links for both Kindle and paperback versions are featured below in the description. All of my links are featured below. Thanks for liking, commenting, subscribing, and please do share my content with your friends. And I'm happy to announce that channel memberships are now available, so you can help to support my work and receive perks. So I know everybody's on a budget, but if you can afford it, there's several tiers available, and the lowest one is very affordable and would go a long way to helping to support my channel. So thank you in advance for accessing and subscribing to a channel membership. And I've got a few announcements. So for those of you who don't know, my second book called Transdimensional 2, Meet the Greys picture book is now available. This is the proof copy. So this band across the front won't be on the book that you purchase, but it's now available and the links are below. And in this book, the first 2 chapters cover all kinds of information from people who have actually experienced contact with the Greys. And then starting in chapter 3, it's all images. Now, these images are AI generated. They're not photographs, but they are very lifelike. And I was quite pleased to find out that I could work closely with AI to develop these realistic images. And the purpose of this book is not to present myself as an expert on the subject. The purpose of my book is to let people get an idea of what humanoid beings that look different than us might look like, so that when the contact has gotten to the point where it's no longer under debate, obviously they're here, they're showing themselves, they're being represented here in society, which we're very, very close to. You won't be so shocked when you notice that although they all have a head and 2 arms and 2 legs, they can look quite different than us. Now, there's images of females, males, children. I've got images of human-looking Greys. Now, the only thing that the Greys have in common, these are more human-looking Greys. The only thing that the Greys in my book have in common is that their skin tone does not have the pigment necessary to reflect color the way that is in our visible light spectrum. And so to us, they all appear to be gray. But actually, if we have the ability to pick up on a broader spectrum of the color spectrum, we would see that they actually do contain various colors. Some might be shades of orange or more purple or blue, depending on what we're able to see and to pick up. So I also have a chapter that's all images of the hybrid children that those who've had lifetime contact with the Greys have reported in seeing, but not just seeing, but also actually producing. Many people who've had ongoing contact with the Greys have actually been part of the hybrid program and produced their own offspring, as in the case of Dolly Saffron. So I thought that was quite interesting. So again, the purpose of this book is to get you used to seeing humanoids who look a little different than us and may or may not have skin tone that we're able to detect, but that doesn't mean that there's anything off about them. Everybody in my book has had positive experiences. Now, when their experiences first happened, they were frightened, as anybody would, because knowledge of these beings is not basically is part of what we would call forbidden knowledge. It's not been allowed to be in mainstream society, so we have not had exposure to it before. But that doesn't mean that these beings are nefarious in any way. Actually, evidence indicates that they are rooting for us as a race, the human race, and they look forward to us elevating ourselves so that we can be in more full contact with them. We've got our first guest showed up in the live chat is Tony Ann. Hi, Tony Ann. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us today. So today we're going to get into my book, Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors. And we're already up to chapter 7. And we're going to talk about life aboard the big ship. What's that like? What was that like for me? And so I'm going to start reading on page 100. Excuse me. If you've got your book, please do open up and follow along. If you don't yet have your own book, again, the links are in the description for both books. Oh yeah, I have one more announcement I forgot to tell you, is there are images in both of my books, and they're in grayscale when you buy the book. So the images are pretty clear, but I want you to know that if you go to my website and you go under the shop tab, there is a category called inspired images. The link to that is also below in the description. And you can actually download your own PDF copy that contains full-size, full-color images that are found in my books, but are found only in grayscale in my books. So some people want to have the color, full-size color images, and you can collect them and buy them from my shop. They're very, very reasonably priced, only a few dollars. And so if you are interested, that those are also available. So, sorry, I got an itchy nose. So we'll start off chapter 7, Life on the Big Ship, A Different Life. It was difficult at first to learn to stop talking. Generally, everybody knows what everybody else is surface thinking. As I soon discovered, words are merely restricted sets of symbols that hold us back by containing our thoughts into limited, programmed concepts. Upon further reflection, I discovered that the languages spoken or written here on Earth are specific sets of symbols that lock us into deficient ways of thinking and perceiving. Words are part of the construct, and they keep us contained within the artificial Earth matrix. So we are very limited in what we can talk about by the language that we speak, and that goes for English and every other language on Earth. And we were originally, and we still are, given the powers of telepathy, but we don't know about it. We haven't practiced it. It's kind of a lost art. And when we start to communicate telepathically, our communication is going to be far more meaningful and expansive because it's not contained by the words that we're given in our vocabulary. Speaking not only gets in the way of effective communication, but it also takes away from the peacefulness of the environment. Some beings are offended by the way we speak with mouth movements, the showing of the teeth, saliva production, etc. Some of them are very tidy around the mouth, and we come across as scary or threatening when we speak with spoken words. Also, when we vocalize, We emote very intensely as we are perceived by the others. It is offensive to most off-world beings in the same way as being screamed at is offensive to us. As I mentioned previously, telepathy is the universal language, and I, like everybody else who arrives from a speaking world, needs to learn it as soon as possible. Now, I'm just going to take a moment to check and make sure that we are live. Yes, we are. Make sure we are live streaming on the other channels. Um, yeah, it's quite important that, yes, okay, perfect. That I am live streaming on the other channels so that all kinds of people besides YouTube, there's a lot of people gravitating away from YouTube and they're going to Rumble and X where I'm streaming to, because there we have freedom of speech and we don't have to worry so much about being censored or losing our channels or anything like that. So I'll continue on page 100, training and telepathic communication. I made use of a virtual reality device that looked like a narrow plastic headband with small flat circular buds that rested on my temples. As described elsewhere, this band only circled the back and the sides of my head and terminated at my temples. It did not cover my forehead, and after I put it on, I would get into a comfortable position upon my bed. I usually sat cross-legged or I lay flat upon my back and then express the intention of learning to communicate telepathically. The ship's memory the big ship's memory always remembered where I had left off the day before or what I now needed to learn more of before moving on. So, as I've described in other chapters, the big ship is actually conscious and telepathic. And all the information that you could ever want to learn, know, or contribute to is all kept active in something like what we would call the cloud aboard the big ship, is stored in the big ship's consciousness. And so once we master telepathy and become more fully integrated aboard the big ship, we can then communicate directly without the virtual reality system. But as a newcomer, I needed the virtual reality system in order to do that. And it was extremely effective. So there was no goggles that sat over my eyes because I saw with my mind's eye. All the images were produced within my imagination, within my mind, but they were experienced like a lived live experience that I was seeing visually or hearing with my ears. It was really quite efficient, to say the least. In part 2, chapter 6, called Orientation, I previously shared with you the basic level of training. Here I will share with you the next 3 levels of training needed to become proficient in telepathy. Level 2 is the intermediate training, which involves the internal visuals of moving objects and gave me the opportunity to learn to share my thoughts and imaginings with all members of a group, as well as to keep my thoughts and imaginings to myself. This is called shielding, and it serves as an essential internal boundary. So you can imagine if everything we were thinking and feeling was being broadcast, what a mess that would be. It would really be a boundary violation. So we had to learn to keep our thoughts and feelings to ourselves. And that was the hardest part of learning telepathy for me. I could broadcast with some concentration. It was easiest for me to pick up on telepathic imagery that was being sent to me. But keeping those messages to myself, my own thoughts to myself, that was absolutely the biggest challenge of all. As with the basic training, the goal was to keep the provided image in my imagination for 3 seconds, then 6 seconds, and later for 9 seconds, while having no other thoughts, emotions, or feelings about the image. This is harder than it sounds, since here on Earth we are used to having our minds wander, and we seem to imbue meaning into everything. Each time I was successful, I was rewarded with what felt like a warm virtual hug, which I liked very much. Just like in the basic program, though, trial and error and the pleasing reward. Sorry, just like in the basic program, though, trial and error and the pleasing reward system, I learned how to receive and project simple three-dimensional images. So the what I describe as being like a warm virtual hug, I think that is the ship would emit some kind of frequencies or feedback to my brain that helped me to release dopamine. And so every time I got the imagery done properly, I had what felt like a warm virtual hug. And it was really very pleasing and very motivating. Whereas when I made mistakes, I just didn't get the dopamine rush. So it was kind of like there was no punishment, there was just positive reward. But in this way, I was able to learn actually quite quickly. Now, in level two intermediate training, simple three-dimensional images were provided in the beginning from my experiences here on Earth, but in later days, they included objects that I discovered while aboard the big ship. At first, these objects were stationary and simply presented a sphere, a cube, a pyramid, but later they took on more complexity and later yet were presented as objects from my everyday life, like a bouncing basketball, a spoon filled with jam, the building of a house, the growth of a flower, my cat grooming herself, etc. As I progressed, I was given even more complicated moving images, like a woman and a man with a child walking through a forest or a garden or a busy city, etc. And finally, I was also given even more complex images or items found in my everyday ET environment. Each lesson, excuse me, each lesson began this way, which was followed by the second part of each lesson. I saw in my mind's eye the visual image of a room with a few more other beings also present. The goal now was to keep the images that appeared in my imagination private and not share them with the other beings in the room. This was very difficult for me. Early on, I found it easiest to receive images and messages, and with some concentration, I was able to project images and feelings to the whole group, but in kind of a haphazard manner. However, keeping my images and feelings to myself continued to be difficult, and it required intense concentration and mental focus. While using the virtual headset, the people who appeared to me to be in the room with me would simply smile and raise a hand each time my private imaginings leaked out and were perceived by some or all of them. It was very much like learning to whisper when I was used to shouting. I thought I would never catch on, but slowly, sometime during the 4 levels of training in telepathy, I got better at keeping my psychic voice down. And this enabled me to form the internal boundary called shielding. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a scratchy throat today. Level three is the advanced level, where the internal visuals are of several moving complex objects to form concepts, and the learning to share my imaginings with only a few individuals or all of the group, as well as to keep them to myself. The goal continued to be to keep the provided intricate images in my imagination for 3 seconds, then 6 seconds, and later for 9 seconds while having no other thoughts, emotions, or feelings about the images. Each time I was successful, I was rewarded with the now familiar warm virtual hug, which I enjoyed so much. Through trial and error and the pleasing reward system, I soon learned how to receive and project complex images, concepts, and messages. For instance, like how to sow and care for a plant while watching for common issues that might hinder its growth, or how to participate participate in and follow the rules for a recreational activity. Now, before I go on, I want to mention to you that you all can practice telepathy with each other. So, what I would recommend is that you sit sort of comfortably facing each other, and you can be in the same room or a different room. It doesn't matter. There is no time or space when we're using telepathy. And try projecting images to each other, taking turns. And in the beginning, you want to project like a circle, a square, or a triangle, very simply, without having any thoughts about it or any emotional content, just the images, and see if the other person can interpret them or pick them up. And once they're able to pick them up, then you move on in complexity. So then you would move on to a sphere, a cube, or a pyramid. And once you're able to pretty much always pick up that from each other, you can then move on to more complex things. And of course, it will probably take longer. Um, in three-dimensional time and space for us to really get good at it. But if you start practicing and practice with your children, make kind of a game out of it, you'll start to strengthen your own telepathic abilities while here on Earth, and also your intuition. So I actually recommend that you follow the instructions in this book as best you can and practice with each other. So the goal now was to keep the images that appeared in my imagination private and to not share them with the other beings in the virtual room. This continued to be a challenge, but I was able to project images and feelings to the whole group or to only a few. So I was learning to telepathically whisper after all. I was getting much better at keeping my psychic voice down, and this enabled me to become even more proficient at shielding. Shielding is also really important for us to practice, even within our own minds and our own bodies. There are many kinds of thoughts that do not benefit us, and we can shield those ourselves. It's not that you want to be in denial about the things that you need to think about, but it's more that you want to shield from yourself and imagery and messages that don't serve a good purpose in your life. You don't need them. Start replacing them with positive imagery and positive affirmations. And I think that is quite important. There's quite a bit about how to do that on the internet online now. So, level 4 is mastery, where the internal visuals are of many moving complex objects to form even more complicated concepts, the application of appropriate emotional content, and the learning to share my imaginings with only a few individuals or all of the group, as well as to keep my thoughts and imaginings private. An example of one of these lessons included a social situation which required specific emotional content that I was not used to expressing, and another scenario required me to withhold my emotions altogether during what I perceived to be an emotionally triggering event. It is a lot of work, but when introduced one step at a time and with consistent effort, the payoff is amazing and even exhilarating. Of course, this daily practice gave me much confidence, and I was soon able to participate in many new social activities that I longed for. I was now able to train for a career and was eligible to participate in the pre settlement program. So if you find yourselves aboard the big ship or any big city ship, you will need to become proficient at telepathy before you can actually be assigned duties and have basically free roam and be around everybody. It's really critical. And I think it's really important. And it would sure solve a lot of problems here on Earth. We wouldn't have the language barriers anymore. So, as another bonus, I was able to make other beings feel more comfortable, and my social network and personal community grew and grew. So before I go on to work and career, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions about telepathy. Please post them in the live chat, and I would be happy to address those issues. So while I'm waiting, I guess I will continue. Page 103, work and career. There is a spirit of cooperation and sharing which permeates the social and work environments. As I mentioned previously, recreational trade goes on very much amongst most beings as a social custom. But nobody actually needs anything because there is an abundance of everything we might need or desire. There is no shortage, and so on a social level, beings are generous and eager to please. By nature, they are unselfish and very non competitive. This is abundantly clear within the training programs and the workforce. So, as I described earlier in the book, there's technology that creates anything we would need, anything you could think of, your clothing, your dishes, you name it, jewelry, you name it, the big ship create it. You co-create with it, you let the big ship know what it is you want, and the big ship creates it. And this technology, I would describe it loosely as being kind of somewhere in between a replicator as seen on Star Trek or a 3D printer as seen today in modern Earth. So it's kind of like in between. So it is a bit of a printing system, and I don't exactly know all the details on how it works, but basically you can have anything you want, and they have no use for money, as I will get into a little bit later. The work environment is curious to me. It is efficient, and there is an overlap between training, work, entertainment, and recreation. We study and work according to our area of interest. It could be arts, sciences, service, it doesn't matter. All training and work overlap with recreation and entertainment. Everyone loves what they do. It's a fun and intensely interesting place to work and pursue our passions. So, if you could imagine that you didn't have to work to provide money to pay for your expenses, it would free up all of your time to just pursue the things you're super interested in. And so you could think of it as being hobbies, and those are developed into what you do for work. It overlaps with what you would do for leisure or even recreation, and you tend to gravitate towards other beings that share the same passions, exchanging research and all kinds of things. Very, very interesting place to be. Here on Earth, we're taught that if there was some kind of a universal basic income, which I am neither supporting or poo pooing here, I'm not giving you an opinion on it. But if there was such a thing, most people who feel well would pursue their passions. So they'd start studying geography, photography, looking after animals, botany, like you name it. We could just pursue our interests and get better and better at it and have like this very highly trained um, population that has so much to contribute towards society. And so just something to think about. Here is an example of how a career could progress. And this is a little bit how I was able to progress in my own career aboard the big ship. An interest in plants leads to a botany specialization, which leads to intergalactical botanical research, which leads to resettlement advisement specialization. Beings begin their training through the use of tablets, then virtual reality, which can include the classroom experience, and then later real life training with others who are more advanced in their education. Instead of attending an assigned job to produce money, time is spent pursuing our interests, and beings personally choose the career they wish to enjoy. In the beginning of orientation, we are assessed as to learning style, areas of interest, talents, and intentions. So choosing a career is not that difficult. So, as I mentioned earlier, that is basically how it works aboard the big ship. So, I was super interested in the plants. I started to study botany. I then became a bit of a specialist in um, different botanicals from different worlds, different environments, and that led to resettlement advisement. So then I could be on committees advising the best way to resettle humanoids to these various planets and habitats, as I've described in previous chapters. Another of the training options they offer is the opportunity to resettle aboard and learn technical or service related skills related to the maintenance and the purpose of the big ship. This usually includes extensive training and support services to assist residents and visitors with their various needs. My buddy was one of the many beings who were born on the big ship, and and most live their whole lives there, never resettling on any planets. ET residents do research, serve as hosts, educators, tutors, scientists, engineers, and social support workers. So there are many, many beings who live aboard these massive ships. And as I've described in other chapters, they're massive. Some of them are as big as the Earth, some are even larger. And these are self-contained communities. And or beings emigrate and emigrate depending. And it's for me, it was a very positive experience to be there. Guests like me also use the big ship and the company of these beings to participate in exopolitical ambassador work, intergalactic resettlement advisement, training, the adding of our culture and wisdom to their data banks, etc. During some of these meetings, I was and currently am requested to give rationales for human behaviors, politics, and other aspects of Earth life. And I find this work mostly boring, even though it is considered important. While visiting as an exopolitical ambassador, I am aware that I am mostly disembodied and in astral form. If I wake up in my earthly bed to use the washroom while I am also attending a meeting on the big ship, I feel embarrassed, but apparently they are not interested in my toilet routine. It is as though I am paused there, well, briefly half awake here, and this took a bit of getting used to. So I speak very little towards the work I did as an exopolitical ambassador for several reasons. For one reason, I have chosen, with the assistance of the elders aboard the big ship, to suppress those memories. Because if I had them, there are people from various agencies here on Earth who would pester me for the information or for the intel. And to avoid that, nuisance in my life, I don't have that information to give. So even if they subjected me to harsh treatments or psychedelics or any kind of technology, they would not get anything from me. And that's to my own protection. The second thing is, they're not just interested in me and my perceptions, they're interested in all of us and all of our perceptions because we all view things a little differently. And there are actually millions of us here on Earth who take part in the ambassador in the ambassador exopolitical ambassadorship positions, but we don't remember. And again, that's for our own safety. Um, the other thing is that they want to know how everything on Earth is affecting us, how it's affecting us physically, socially, mentally, psychologically, intuitively, everything, everything. And it all goes into kind of like a data bank, I guess. And then they're able to ascertain how they want to progress when they're reached out to by us humans, and how they would want to get involved in our affairs. possibly for future resettlement, I don't know. But I do know that they are able to, let's just consider it like broadband broadcast. They are able to contact all of us all the time. It's like rain falling on all of us. But some of us are more in tune and able to pick up on it than others. And those of us who are able to hold the frequency and are able to participate, we then would go on to become ambassadors. And it's very, very important work um, pertaining to everything. Um, on the other hand, here's how I chose my career while I was aboard the big ship physically. I was very impressed by the abundance of plants that grew all over the big ship. I loved the diversity of colors, the growth patterns, textures, aromas, tastes, and uses for the lush gardens that lined the corridors, rooms, and other growing areas. I was especially interested in the plants we use for food and the many ways to create combination meals. I had tried being vegan on Earth, but found that I have sensitivities to various anti nutrients and chemicals like pesticides and preservatives, and the vegan lifestyle caused me much digestive distress. But here on the big ship, everything agreed with me, at least the ones or the foods with the flavors that were pleasing to my senses. And I was intrigued. I began investigating various food items that appealed to me to find out how this vegan way of eating was different from what I had tried on Earth. I immediately discovered there was an absence of lectins, oxalates, and other anti nutrients. And of course, there was no chemical intervention to their growing process. Everything was natural or genetically engineered through breeding selection to become innocuous. This explained a lot, and it was apparent that ET digestion and physiology is very similar to that of humans. Later, I began more in depth research into the biology of the many plants, and soon I was using the virtual headset to have more of a classroom experience with a structured learning environment. Oh, hi, Leah. Nice of you to join us. So I'm just reading from my book, Chapter 7, page 104. I already covered quite a bit about telepathy and the advanced training in telepathy and ways that we here on Earth can actually practice telepathy with our loved ones. So after the show, I encourage you to go back and watch the replay. Leah says, was it tasting better than our current foods worldwide? Yes and no. Our taste buds, our mouths secrete um, juices or saliva that has specific enzymes for breaking down specific foods, like, for instance, things that taste sweet and releasing the sweet taste that our taste buds pick up. So while aboard the big ship, it actually takes a while while you're eating these plants before they're absorbed into your system, and your body knows to secrete the specific enzymes you would need to break those foods down to give you flavors that we're not used to experiencing here on Earth. So it was very interesting that it took some time for me to fully taste. And as I was taught by my extraterrestrial friends, some things tasted horrible on their own, but when combined with other plants, they formed a combination of a very pleasing flavor. And yes, Leah, that also goes for smelling. You know, it takes time. Yes, there are definitely different smells, different flavors, different textures than what we would experience here on Earth. And like I said, when I'm there biologically, it took time for my body to adjust. But then I found all kinds of new tastes and smells, and it was really a pretty interesting experience. Hi, Colleen. Colleen has joined us from Palm Springs, California. I have been to Palm Springs. It's lovely, and I bet it's nice this time of year. Maybe tad chilly, but not bad. So I'm jealous. I'm up here in central Alberta, where it has been until the last couple of days very cold. So it's been like 25 or 30 below zero centigrade. And with the wind that we've had, it's been much like 40 or 45 degrees below zero centigrade. When it gets that cold, I don't like to go out. Well, I might dash to the car and dash to the store, but it's very, very cold. It's even hard to breathe. So we're really looking forward to spring. And I think it's lovely that some of you live where the weather is nice. Actually, I'm sure that it's actually kind of hard to take in the summer when it gets really hot and dry. But, we live all over the earth in different places and we adapt. Um, Let's see. Oops, Colleen says, I used to live in Alaska and I would take hot baths all the time. I bet. And Leah says, Chicago here, snow on the ground hitting 50 tomorrow. Yeah, I think 50 where you guys live would be like around 10 degrees above zero here, which is very tolerable, especially after it being so bitterly cold. And Colleen says, I used to live in Alaska. Oh, yeah, and I would take hot baths all the time. Sorry, I already got that. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, and I'm sure in the summertime you take cold showers to cool off. So, yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm wondering if anybody, before I continue, has anything they want to say or ask me regarding the work and leisure, recreation, or telepathy, or anything like that before I proceed. Um, just want to say, Colleen says, I saw my first orb in Alaska. I called it in. Oh, fantastic. So, for those of you in the live chat, the reason I'm reading out your comments is because this is going to be pre-recorded and go out on an audio podcast, and the listeners won't have access to the live chat. They won't be able to see your comments. So I'm reading them out so everybody can enjoy your comments. Colleen, can you communicate with Ethan now? I'm not sure who Ethan is, but I'm sure that Colleen will understand that. Can you communicate with ET, Karen? Oh, absolutely. I do it all the time. I have what I call a soul team. And in my book, I get into who makes up my soul team. So my soul team could be extraterrestrials, angels, or beings in the spiritual realms. It can be deceased loved ones. It can be learned scholars that are now long since passed from our perspective. It can be crypto terrestrials, which are beings who are alive but hidden from us through technology here on Earth. So many kind of beings. And I'm what I call a wide receiver, where I can pick up from anybody. And I can tell by the nature of the physical sensations what kind of beings is the communication likely to be coming from. But what's interesting is all of their communications to me are congruent. There's nobody giving me opposing perspectives. It's all congruent. It's all to do with learning to love myself more fully, giving myself permission to be authentic and sovereign, and also gentle nudges on where to go next, for what book to write or what to have on my podcast, things like that. Pauline, Leah says, can you tell if I have hybrid babies? No, Leah, I'm sorry. I wish I could. I'd be happy to help you, but you know that information and you can access it from going within. Leah says, the truth is simple and simple is the truth. I totally agree with you guys. You know what? I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to play promotion for both my books. Then I'll come right back and continue reading and sharing information. Learn the stunning details about ET diversity and culture, along with their advanced ways of living and expressing spirituality, which is in no way like anything imagined here on Earth. Transdimensional, meet the new neighbors. introduces you to many different ET beings, the healing pods, the interior of the big ship, my orientation process, cultural events, and off-world mating practices. In my contact experience, I learned a great deal about the big ship, intergalactic and transdimensional travel, intergalactic planetary research, and the various options for resettlement. Once I published my first book, I felt the need to create a second book called Transdimensional 2, Meet the Greys Picture Book. I worked with AI to develop many images of beings that we have come to know of as the Greys. These beings come from many places, realms, dimensions, and timelines, and although they are of the same species as other humanoids, they are from many different family lines and races. What qualifies them as greys is that their skin does not contain the pigment necessary to reflect light in our visible range of the color spectrum, so to us, they all appear to be various shades of gray. Beyond this physical attribute, there is much diversity in their origins, cultures, purposes, and physiological details. My goal is to get you used to the looks of beings which are different than humans in order to reduce your fear and increase your familiarity so you will remain more rational and grounded once the ET presence escalates beyond debate. Enjoy these images and notice the things we have in common so you will see that although they are different from us in appearance, we are essentially many family lines within one species. Paperback and Kindle versions of both books are now available on Amazon worldwide. Search the Amazon and Kindle bookstores and pick up your copies today. And we're back. And Leah says, Unity consciousness. Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody is affected by unity consciousness. And, I was on a show yesterday as a guest talking about my book, and people were talking about the different kinds of ET races and their intentions. And I told them the same thing I'm going to tell you. You know what? We're all governed by the same spiritual laws, all of us. So whatever we reap, we sow. And, I think that would reduce the fear in a lot of people's minds towards ET if they understand that unity consciousness is kind of a prime directive. So I'm just going, oops, let me just see. There's one more question here from Leah. She says, Karen, may I ask you, have you ever seen yellow beings or avians? Um, and No, I have not seen avians, but I have seen beings that are what I would consider more orange or yellow in color. Yes, I have aboard the big ship. So I'm just going to continue a bit, page 104, virtual learning. The virtual reality experience is like watching a video, but it is inside your head and it feels quite real, like a live event. There is no bulky equipment, just a narrow band that fits loosely around the sides and back of your head. While using it, you recline in a very comfortable padded chair in one of the many community rooms, or you can also recline comfortably on your bed in your private quarters. At first, I used the virtual reality system to train myself to send and receive communication telepathically, but later I used it for more advanced training in other areas of interest. Virtual reality offers the experience of nonverbal lectures, discussions, and in depth learning, which are received by the brain as live participation. This type of learning is so very efficient and is perfectly tailored to our personal life view and educational style. Every day, I spent private time doing research with tablets or virtual reality, and I absolutely loved it. Later, when we feel ready, we move on to actively working with others in the field that we have received the initial training for. The big ship is designed with areas for everything that we could possibly want to explore and experience, including the sciences, ship maintenance, health and beauty, morality and philosophy, advanced telepathic and telekinetic skills, recreation, and so much more. Well, hi, there's heavyweights, light fields. Moral universalism applies to all beings in our universe. Absolutely. It absolutely does. And the other thing that is well recognized in other dimensional realities is, we're taught, we're born, we come into existence, we die, and we cease to exist. And really, no other beings believe in that. They all believe that energy can neither be created or destroyed, and we will come back and experience many, many different lives. And we'll come back even as ETs, different dimensional realities, different timelines. And all that information goes to the evolution of our personal soul, well, fragment, I guess you could call it, and also the learning and benefit of the whole. So the whole universe has an ecology to it, which includes the seen and the unseen realms. And the basic principles are actually the same. Leah says thanks and gives us some love. How very, very nice. Lovely to have you join us today. So I'm just going to read on a little bit more. Recreation, play, and leisure. ET beings are different from Earth people in many ways. For one thing, these beings are not into physical fitness as they naturally maintain healthy lifestyles, but they don't try to bulk up or slim down or contour their shape. Working out for physical fitness is a weird and foreign concept. I enjoyed seeing the beauty and health they all displayed, and I was surprised to find out that they have no concept for working out exercise, diet, or for shaping their bodies beyond what comes natural to them via their genetics. Missing too was any concept of self identity, what we here on Earth would consider identity politics. So what was also missing was guilt, shame, or regret. These beings are free to simply be. Like most of them, I enjoyed going for daily long walks around my floor of the big ship, taking time to get acquainted with new friends, and I loved my ample leisure time. Nobody was stressed, in a rush, or under a schedule. In addition, not every city ship has the same culture, but the intention is pretty much the same: tolerance and compassion with love and cooperation. Like humans, these beings have a high need for play and are full of curiosity. One commonly used device I have seen used is what I call the toy maker. This device came in various sizes, was usually box shaped, had touch symbols on the sides, and contained some kind of a small internal 3D printer, which just prints to input instruction. Then, when the being is done with what they have created, they simply put it back into the top of the device and the elements are quickly recycled. I saw it produce games, puzzles, blocks, documents, and an unknown to me object that looked a bit like an abacus. So, today when you watch someone doing 3D printing, it's very slow, line by line. It reminds me of the first printers that came out with computers back in the late 80s, and they were dot matrix, and they would, if you're trying to print out an image, it was always pixelated, and it would do one row and then another row. Well, you compare that to the high speed printing that we have today. Well, the same would be for their 3D printers. So within what I called the toy maker, there's a little 3D printer, but it was super lightning fast, and also super lightning fast to recycle whatever you had it produce, and when you were done with it, you just put it in the top and it got recycled and then used to make something else. So it was really super efficient. Everything aboard the ship is super efficient. So while I'm on the subject of play, I used my tablet to design my own pajamas and day wear. The scan that was done of me during my orientation process was also available to be used to produce a holographic image of my exterior physical self, which I displayed on my tablet for testing my clothing designs. By the way, all beings that I saw wore clothes when not in the communal bath. A few beings wear what look like jumpsuits, but most are free to wear whatever they desire. I designed during my time off some comfortable, loose-fitting pajama-style clothes to wear during the awake and sleep cycles. I found these to be very comfortable, which was more important to me at the time than the notion of fashion. Yeah, that's very true for me. I like baggy, loose, if possible, natural fabrics. I like to be comfortable. To me, that's more important than the way I perceive that I look. Um, there's no judgment about how we express ourselves physically. I used a drag and drop system on my tablet to create the outfits I wanted to wear, and at the end of the day, I put my clothes into the recycling chute, and my new items were then printed and delivered to my room while I slept. Within my bedside dresser in my private room, there are trays or drawers which provide me with whatever I wanted. The desired objects were always there waiting for me when I awoke. It seemed like magic, but I'm sure there was a logical, technical explanation. My point is that you can create and have anything you desire or need, and then just recycle it when you are done. Abundance is a given. There are not a lot of rules and policies, but everything is put to good purpose. Further, while aboard the big ship, I observed various ways that beings played and experienced what we would consider to be recreation. Although not very competitive in their everyday lives, ET could show much competition and skill while playing all kinds of sports, and especially in the mental, telepathic component of any playful physical activity. It didn't matter if the sport included maneuvering an object like a ball or physical agility, there was always a competitive mental component to the game. Not being much interested in sports, I couldn't begin to tell you about all the subtle details, but the games were entertaining to watch. Even in the absence of ego, one player or grouping of players would eventually concede, and this would end the game. Due to the structure of the economy, everyone has the opportunity to join a team or could participate as a spectator in any event or as many events as desired. So I'm wondering if any of you have seen the Circus Soleil. You can see quite a few of their videos on YouTube now. And the Circus Soleil always reminds me of some of the sports that were played on board the big ship, because these beings are incredibly fit and they push themselves to incredible limits where they seem to defy gravity. Very interesting. And but there was always this mental telepathic component that we don't necessarily see in the sports and games that we play here on Earth. So that was as much a part of the competition and the playing of a game as anything physical. So I thought that was really interesting. Leah says, that sounds like heaven, literally. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And again, the reason I'm sharing all of this with you is to show you what life could be like here on Earth. These beings are not that far ahead of us developmentally. We can live the way they live. We can even start now. There's nothing stopping us. We just have to pull our minds out of our screens and our phones and start creating and working on ourselves and thinking about, instead of politics and problems, start thinking about what we want, how we want paradise to manifest here on earth. Really, that's the job. That is it in a nutshell. Okay, I'm just going to read a little bit more before I conclude from the book today. Please feel free um, uh, oh, to leave comments. And Leah says, our attention is on our new currency. Well, it all depends on what you mean by currency. There are many different kinds of currency, but it's a very interesting thought, Leah. So the economy on board the big ship, they use a resource trade-based economy. There is no money and everything is provided for free. As I mentioned, there is much trade within the ship and within beings aboard other ships. Everything we want or need can be printed using technology which was similar to a replicator, as seen on the Star Trek series, but it's only used for creating inanimate objects. Still, culture requires its symbols, and trade definitely brings enjoyment to many. In this way, humans are very similar to ET. For an example of trade between ships, as mentioned previously, the waste management system is biologic and involves small critters, which I call bugs, to break the waste down before it is rebuilt into new useful fluids and items. On one occasion, we did trade with another ship whose organic waste management bug community was depleted. So we gave them some of ours to replenish their stock. Everything has a purpose, and most things on the big ship are what we would consider to be living and have life cycles and require care, like our food sources. I'm just going to read a little bit about food and dining, and then we'll call it quits for the book, and I'll take any last comments and questions you might have in the live chat. Food and dining, always a delight. I found the gardens almost everywhere, and they were well maintained, profuse, and integrated within the big ship. Everyone shares in their care by pruning areas when they become a little overgrown, and by taking the time to pollinate buds and flowers to encourage growth in areas that are thinning. Some species of plants were cross pollinated to produce vegetation meant to satisfy different preferences and nutritional requirements, but this was usually initiated and attended to in a lab. Once well established, these new plants were added to the company of the rest. Our daily routine always included walks about on the big ship, and we leisurely picked fruits, berries, leaves, flowers, or whatever parts of the plants we were drawn to and nibbled to our satisfaction. I was especially drawn to the sweet and savory berries and to one plant in particular. It had yellow leaves with large pale yellow flowering petals that had such a high fat content that they literally melted in my mouth. Adding these dairy-like petals to other foods was like seasoning them with butter. Some beings collected these petals to add to herbs and spices to create rich, spreadable delights and cheese-like bars. There were so many different plant items that interested me, and I loved to experiment with food combinations. With the assistance of the big ship, I designed and created a large oval basket with several different compartments so I could keep my sweet items separated from the savory and prevent my delicate butter petals, fragile leaves, and tender stems from getting squished by the heavier items. It had a strap long enough to tuck my head and shoulder through, so it hung down to my waist, leaving my hands free to pluck and tuck everything that appealed to me. I loved the time I spent sharing meals with my friends. There were always several food preparation stations available, with many cheerful beings ready to share their spoils and culinary specialities. Once I joined a specific group, we donated the foods we had gathered to those the others had brought with them, and then we busied ourselves with various cooking and chilling elements. My friends always enjoyed showing me new ways to combine and prepare the delicious provisions, although some I enjoyed more than others. As I have mentioned earlier, all of the edible plants grew in the hydroponic system, and their irrigation nutrient system was a continuation of the overall fluid system of the big ship. The recycling system and all manner of waste is broken down to its smallest elements. Fresh water is filtered out to supply the sinks, showers, and thirst quenching stations. But there is another more viscous fluid which is extracted and sent first to the communal baths and then it is circulated via the hydroponic system to nourish the plants. All other waste supplied the solid materials for the printers, and nothing was wasted. Life on the big ship is easy to adapt to because it all makes sense and has good purpose. Even our daily routines are comfortable and enjoyable. So we'll break it off there and talk about my daily routines and some other really cool stuff that happened aboard the big ship. We'll talk about that next week. I wanted to tell you that, yeah, there was a lot of variety in what I ate. So, for instance, I mentioned the butter petals that were very creamy. Well, there were other plants that had some kind of like sap that was very neutral and became thick when it was whipped. And I love to combine berries that were sweet or even savory and this fluid, like sap-like fluid, and the butter petals, and it made like a really delicious kind of a pudding or yogurty type of dessert that was really, really good. Sometimes I would just eat that for a meal. Everything was super delicious. So I'm just wondering if there's any last minute comments from anybody before we end the show today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you're here in the live chat, it's been delightful to see you and talk to you and share your comments. If you're watching the replay, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, all those out on audio, very much appreciate each and every one of you. So it's been very nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon with all of you. And I just want to let you know next Wednesday on the Quantum Guide Show, I am doing a premiere. It's a pre-record with Phil Warder. We're going to talk about drumming and jumping timelines and animal totems. That's going to be a very interesting show. And that airs at noon Pacific, 1 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. Eastern Time if you'd like to join us. And then next week we'll continue on with Life on the Big Ship, and I'm going to talk to you about some really cool stuff, like a concert that I went to. What was that like? That was incredible and super intense. I'm also going to talk about the joining of the big ships. So when other city ships would come and join up with the big ship, we'd have all kinds of festivals and things, and more about the trade, the kind of trade that went on between us, and all kinds of other really interesting things. So I guess that is it for today. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you on Wednesday if you could make it for the Quantum Guide Show. Otherwise, we'll see you next Sunday for another installment from my book, Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors. The links are all below. Please do pick up your copy. I think you'd really benefit. There's so much more to this book than just what happened to me aboard the big ship. It's got all kinds of spiritual information that will help you on your journey, regardless of what journey you happen to be on at this time. It's a very, very good book to have in your library, very good resource. And of course, it would make a super good gift if you wanted to give a copy to anyone else. And again, all of the images are available on my website under Inspired Images. The link to that can also be found below. And I even sell signed copies of my book if you'd like a signed copy, and the link for that is also below. So without further ado, I guess we will close out the show for today. And again, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me for the Aliens and Angels podcast. Read about my true life ET contact in my book called Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors, which is now available on Amazon worldwide. Subscribe to my YouTube, Rumble, and X channels at Karen Holton TV. The like button and leave me a comment. And please do share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All of the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you'll also find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.